As many of you know, in health coaching and beyond, Ollie and I alternate conversations between the two of us, chewing over hot topics, latest news, and emerging ideas, but also bring you conversations with thought leaders and people we admire in the field of health coaching. So today it's been Ollie and me having a conversation about the latest document from NHS England about adult community musculoskeletal service specification. So again, we've done the reading. Ollie has done a blog about it. So if you didn't want to have to read the whole document, although it's only 8 pages, so I think you probably could, we'll definitely put the link in the show notes for you. But Ollie and I just think a little bit about what this might mean practically, what we might see, what we might notice that's different if MSK services look like this. So hopefully you're going to find something useful and hopefully encouraging for you in the work that you are doing. So I hope you enjoy it. Welcome back, Ollie. It's been a while since we've kind of met again. We've had some great podcasts recently. I've really, really enjoyed listening to those. But you've been away, so yeah. How's your holiday been?
Oh, it's been lovely, and it is really nice, isn't it? I mean, we were blessed. We went to the Lake District, and you usually expect an English summer holiday to be wet and rainy. You might get the odd little glimpse of blue sky, but we had wall-to-wall blue sky for a week. I mean, how lucky is that? And to be honest with you, there's no better place in the world to be than the Lake District when it's lovely weather. So beautiful. The only complaint I've got is that our attempt at cold water swimming just wasn't cold enough, Tim. You know, the lakes and the streams, they were positively warm.
But you've got to start somewhere, Ollie. So maybe if that's just eased you in, then you just need to keep it going through the winter. It'll get cold enough at those points. So yeah, just keep going. Yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, I was quite happy to be warm water swimming. I think that's the difference in you and me, Tim. I'm just a warm water, soft southerner, and you're a hardcore cold water dipper.
You've got it right. You've got it right. But there has been some really interesting. I mean, we've obviously been holding the fort while you've been away. It's been
Thank you.
fine. But there've been some interesting documents published. I think last week. And I think you've written about this already in a blog, haven't you? But there's the Adult Community Musculoskeletal Service Specification. So yeah, so you've already kind of reflected a little bit on this. So do you want to kind of share a little bit in terms of what your take homes were from that?
Well, it was really exciting, wasn't it? I mean, we keep an eye out on things that are being written in our field, health coaching and beyond, and this really sort of flagged up because one of the first sort of core NHS documents that came out that specifically talked about health coaching, I would say in parity to every other aspect of kind of health and well-being treatment for people. So it was the community-based adult MSK service specification. And I know that some of the kind of people who've been sort of championing person-centered care, people like Chloe Stewart and Amy Robson, have had a real strong part behind the scenes in making sure that it really expresses those person-centered approaches. But wasn't it fantastic just to see an NHS England document that starts to have a different language in it? It's really orientated around how we work collaboratively, how we work broader than just a health system. We bring in workplace support, we bring in the voluntary sector, we bring in the leisure sector. We think imaginatively about how the whole system enables good musculoskeletal health. So yeah, it was a really exciting document to me.
Yeah, it was good to see those very specific words, wasn't it? Personalized care, what matters based around what matters to the person, so that what matters to you kind of conversation, and health coaching and social prescribing link workers. And again, using all of that, shared decision making, all of that specific language, which absolutely kind of floats that boat, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Kind
and
of in that document.
peer support as well in there.
Yeah.
Which we've seen, haven't we? So MSK, musculoskeletal services, very much include, the sort of aches and pains of normal day life, but a lot of it is around chronic pain, isn't it? People living with persistent aches and pains, the area of chronic pain that we've had a long-term interest in. And we know that the delivery of that involves all those things. It's so much more than just the traditional health intervention. So great to see that document recognizing that, but also it is, I think for me, it's a real shift in a real shift in the tone of the way the NHS wants to operate. From I said in that blog, it's moving away from a doing to type service where services get more and more refined and efficient and clever at how it does things to people, takes people's blood pressure, gives them injections, prescribes them medicines, refers them to specialists, does operations, moving to recognizing actually we need to be collaborating with people and designing services that enable people to look after themselves as much as it does things to people. And that, for me, that was a real big shift in this document.
Yeah, what is it that people can do for themselves? And again, it's not abandoning people. Say like it's all up to you now. It's definitely we have a role to play in that. But yeah, it was good. It was good to see that all the way. I think all the way through that document. It's not about, again, we talked about that just before we kind of went live. We were talking about that kind of one-stop shop and the idea that yes, it might be really efficient to kind of do everything in one visit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's effective. So just because something is convenient and getting everything in one place, I don't know. I think we've been lured into that a little bit, thinking, well, that's the answer. But this feels like it's not saying that. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? And and maybe we're reading a little bit too much into it. We're a bit excited about it, but it's not necessarily what you do. So you could do a one-stop shop. Brilliant, great idea, really efficient for the staff, really useful for the patients. But during that one-stop shop, you might, take their blood pressure, you might, capture some bloods, you might sort of catch their height and weight, you might sort of do an Oxford hip score, you might do a whole lot of medicalized things. They might see a physio and a nutritionist and a nurse practitioner, an occupational therapist, maybe even. But sort of like it could be quite doing too focused. Whereas you could have the same one-stop shop where the focus is around enablement, coaching, peer support, building people's confidence, and you would be operating that one-stop shop in a very different way. So I'm hoping that that's what this was alluding to. It's not so much exactly how you organize things, but the mindset and the spirit behind it of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of that, because we've been involved in training people in that what matters to you conversation, but some organizations that really made good use of that. I'm just thinking of like the Physio Works, the community physio service in Sheffield has been doing these community appointment days. They weren't the first to do it, but it absolutely kind of felt like this is kind of a real move towards this. I suppose there was an element of a one-stop shop, but exactly what you're saying, it wasn't just about just doing things efficiently. They had people, it was in a leisure centre. So people came for their appointment. They had an appointment with a physiotherapist. They kind of started with the kind of what matters to you conversation. And on site in that big hall, they had people with various stalls from the voluntary sector and the community sector, and other people that might be able to support the person in the things that weren't necessarily directly related to their hip or their back or their shoulder, but just gave people the opportunity to access some of those other services if that fitted with kind of what mattered to them. So I think that seems like almost like a really good example. And I know Doncaster had done exactly the same thing. And I think the feedback from patients has been overwhelmingly positive, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I think for me, I think that signposts what is good for us to talk about here, because I've already a little bit on LinkedIn, I've heard people sort of say, yeah, it's okay to say these things. But actually, what does that actually mean? What's actually different in practice when you, let's say, use a health coaching approach to community MSK? So you've given a really great example there of where things are set up with the different group of people invited. There's clearly a different sort of focal point of enabling people and helping them to sort of like connect up with other organizations, groups that they might be able to join, other people that might build their confidence. And I think that for me, that is the core shift, is the focus of how you organize things and how you actually practice, how you even talk to people, where you put your priority of your questions and your kind of shared plan you might make with people. It's all around this enabling and bringing people's skills and confidence higher up the agenda rather than the kind of medical model that we want to apply to people.
I mean, I can give you a kind of a real world experience. My wife Alison has had a recent kind of physio appointment for her shoulder, and she was she came back from the appointment. She said, "Oh my goodness, that was such an amazing experience." I'm thinking, "Oh, tell me more about it. What was it that made it really, really good?" And she said, "The person that I saw, Vanessa, I'm going to say Vanessa at the Physio Works, what she just created that kind of a sense of ease. So there was no rush. There was an absolute paying of attention to what was going on for Alison, how this painful shoulder, how that was affecting the rest of her life, and a really validating conversation. And then that shared decision making, like, look, here's some of the options. What do you think might be the most useful for you? And then ultimately going forward and giving the injection in a really obviously professional and very competent manner. But it wasn't necessarily that bit. It was the bit that went before that, of just giving her that kind of validation and that attention. And I don't know that it probably took much longer than some other physiotherapy appointments, but it was just the tone of it and the approach of it. Um, and I can contrast that because I've also had a shoulder problem, and I went to see a physiotherapist too. And again, it was very much a medical model kind of, situation. There wasn't maybe much in the way of attention. It was very efficient. I kind of know that I wanted an injection, so maybe that kind of altered things slightly. I didn't demand one, but it was very much they were kind of typing stuff into the computer and not really paying me much attention at all. Then I think as an afterthought, thought they better check some of my shoulder movements. So they did do that. And then it was very efficient. So, okay, well, I'll book you an injection and you'll get an appointment soon. It was all out the door, but there was none of this. How's it affecting you? What is it that you wanted to achieve? All that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that's just the difference between a really good experienced physio and a less experienced one, or something deeper, I suppose, in terms of making that connection. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let's dial down into that because it's really interesting to hear your reflections on that. Because so what you alluded to the fact that sometimes people criticize the fact that you can't do health coaching if you're really time pressured and you haven't got very long, but you're not entirely sure it takes more time. But what is it you think that a skilled practitioner is doing in a more coaching style approach, the sort of approach that Alison had that meant she felt really good and sort of enthused about her appointment, as opposed to, it sounds as though you felt a bit like yours was a bit transactional and you didn't come away with that same sort of feeling that you've been listened to and that paid attention to in the right way. So what are the features then? What's going on?
Yeah, well, there's a mindset. I think there's a mindset which is, like we teach. It's like the person in front of you has the most important contribution to make. They have the best solutions to their own problems. So there's a mindset. So if I know that about the person in front of me, then the way I approach that consultation or that conversation is going to be different. It's going to be very much like, what do you think? Rather than, I suppose, the practitioner maybe just taking the lead.
And telling them what they know.
Yeah, yeah, telling them downloading everything what I know about this particular situation. Because sometimes people will think, oh, that's useful. Just downloading what you know about, impingement of the shoulder, fine. But actually, it's a more human to human connection, isn't it? It's like what really matters to you, what's really important to you. So yes, you've got this pain in your shoulder. So what difference is that making to you right now? How is that affecting your life?
Mm, mm.
And how would you like things to be different?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, what it, and what, and when your shoulder is better, what difference will that make? What will you be doing that you're not doing now? Which sound like very coachy questions, but they don't take very long
Yeah, yeah.
to ask, and they prompt the person to think for themselves rather than being told stuff. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's the bit that really I think people miss, isn't it? It feels like this is sort of soft and fluffy, but that bit you said at the end there, that intentionality of practicing in a way that helps people to think for themselves. I think that's the crux of the health coaching mindset, as you say, but also the skill set as well. And it's it's not necessarily what you tell people, because that usually shuts down people's thinking for themselves, isn't it? It's actually the invitation for people to start to think for themselves and to continue to think for themselves, even when they're not in your presence. That takes exactly the same amount of time, but it changes the dynamic, doesn't it? Remember we often talk about this dynamic, don't we, about thinking in or thinking out, where a practitioner kind of gives people information and thinks inwards, which can almost constricts their thinking, as opposed to the opposite, which is asking questions and being curious and getting people to sort of articulate what's going on. It's not even about the response to those answers. It's just that the mechanism of doing that is getting people thinking for themselves, and that different dynamic. It's a whole different dynamic, isn't it? And that, for me, that's the health coaching dynamic that we're after with these services. And I think that's probably the bit that's just that little bit of icing on the cake that's missing. It's not that practitioners are not good. They're not that, like you say, you want them to do the injections, you want them to understand how to diagnose things about the shoulder, you want them to explain something that people want to know. But the icing on the cake is also doing that in a style that starts to get people thinking and engaged and doing things for themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of said that's kind of the icing on the cake, and it feels like it is, but it feels like, I suppose when you say icing on the cake, it feels like, oh, that's just almost like a nice extra. Do you know what I mean? Whereas actually what we know is that is absolutely at the core of really great care.
Yeah, yeah,
The fact that Alison came back from that appointment and she was full of confidence about how she could then carry on to kind of manage. And I don't know that was just because she was given great advice. I think it was because Vanessa had taken the time to understand what really mattered to Alison. And Alison had been heard, she'd been seen and she'd been heard. And therefore, whatever Vanessa had said, Alison would have had full confidence in. Do you know what I mean? Because she's been heard. Whereas I think sometimes if we don't have that, then sometimes it doesn't matter, even if we have got great advice and great instructions or information for people. If they've not been heard to start with,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
no, you're right to pick me up on that. And in fact, I think hearing you say that about what's made me, it's not the icing on the cake in terms of delivery. It's almost the icing on the cake in how skillful you are as a practitioner, because, as a physio, you'll have had 3 years of training around the physiology, and you want your physio to understand how the shoulder moves and works. You want them to have that core understanding. And as doctors, and everyone expects you to have that core knowledge base. But the effectiveness of how you deliver your core knowledge, I think, is really dictated by your appreciation of health coaching skills. So they're not a huge amount to learn. A bit like the icing on the cake, it's a thin veneer on top, but it makes all the difference to how people receive it. And the most crucial thing, it makes all the difference to how people then go on to lead their life as a result of your contact. So your contact becomes an enabler rather than a pacifier, really. I do think that we are able to use our incredible skills that we've learned over many years in a way that unintentionally shuts people down and stops people thinking. Or you can do the opposite, and you can use those skills in a way that enables people to sort of like take more of a lead for themselves. And it is just that little subtle shift. And I'm so passionate about it because I think we can teach people how to do this really easily. And
Yes.
it's just a thin extra on top, but it makes all the difference to the outcome of the interaction, I think.
Yeah. And actually, my experience of doing some of that teaching is that when people get it, it just brings another level of satisfaction and joy to the work that they do, because actually that is how people want to support their fellow human beings. That's my experience. It's not kind of seen as like, oh, this is something extra I've got to do on top of everything else. This is a different way of being, which actually is more how I'd like to practice from this moment on, because it's not all about me sorting everyone out.
Yeah,
Just downloading everything about something for a lot of people just can be overwhelming. And that's not what you want people to go away from your conversation with, a feeling of overwhelm. You want them to go away with a feeling of confidence, like Alison did.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think actually reflecting, that's one of the things I've definitely tuned into as a clinician. Now that I know how to coach, is you start to see people's energy change, don't you? Start to see them open up. And it's a skill, because you can nurture people. Sometimes people feel very overwhelmed and very in a hole, and you can't just flood them with, right, come on, it's over to you, off you go. You need the skills to be able to nurture them at the right pace. And I think that's the whole thing about tailoring to activation, isn't it? But when you tune into that, you start to see people's energy build, whether it's from a very low level to just being a bit more confident, or that lovely moment where you see people just flourish and go, right, I know what I'm doing now. I'm away. That perhaps comes as people become more activated. But that becomes your source of energy as a clinician. You realize their energy is, you're the person you're working with, their energy has changed. You've transformed their thinking and their optimism and their skill set for self-management and self-care, which will then persist outside the room. And I think once you've tuned into that, it starts to energize your role as a helper and as a carer. We all go into this because we want to see people thrive around us. And you start to notice how what you're doing with people is helping them to grow and thrive rather than feel overwhelmed and weighed down with more burden and more more responsibility.
So, I mean, I've explained that, those community appointment days, that might be one way, I suppose, in which this new MSK specification, what that might look like. But I don't know if you've got any other thoughts in terms of, when let's say you have a service and they are managing to achieve all of the things in this specification that set out, like this is what a really good service does. What are the kind of things do you think would be different or that people would notice?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in a way, I was wanting to get on to sort of the context that it gets delivered as well, because I think it's what was really interesting in that document was around valuing the role that the voluntary sector can play and leisure providers. I think we're seeing more and more leisure providers now, aren't we? Where, personal trainers or, the staff that are working in leisure centres are taking more of a role in this enabling coaching style role. So in a way, I don't think it matters who's doing it necessarily. It's what they're doing. So to answer your question on that, I think it is around systems, services that are seeing people start to think better, start to behave differently. And participation for me is always a really key word, so that might be participation in joining in groups and joining in classes and literally going to leisure centres where they weren't before, or joining groups that they didn't feel confident to join before. But it also might be participating in proactive stuff for themselves, so they do start to do more confident movements. They do start to sort of engage in activities that build their self-confidence and self-belief, which might be eating differently, moving differently, might managing their stress, their sleep, but it also might be just how they start to talk to you, how you start to sense more self-belief and more optimism, in more of a can-do sort of like dialogue you're hearing. So I think those are the sort of things you'll notice. You start to notice people, because these things often build over time, don't they? If a service starts to behave in a more coaching style way, sometimes it might feel a bit strange to start off with. Like you say, people asking you, well, what matters most to you? What are the things you're doing already? What's working already for you? They might initially start to think, well, that's your job, isn't it? I come to you for those suggestions. I want you to be the expert. That's always how it's worked before. But so it can sometimes take a little bit of time before people sort of come back and go, well, actually, okay, yeah, I'm starting to do more things. I'm glad that you're noticing what I'm doing, because that's brilliant, because now I'm starting to get confidence in this, and it gathers its own energy. So it might take a little bit of time before these things start to happen. But I think that's what you're noticing. You're noticing people being more proactive themselves, I think.
Yeah. Great. And in terms of, it's making me think, actually, reminding me, we had a group supervision session in the last week or so where someone came, and we'll get this quite a lot, don't we, on our programs, because you have people who have some personal trainer type experience, and then they kind of layer on the health coaching skills. But in some ways, they kind of still feel like they're kind of wearing two hats, because someone will come and I think they know what a PT is. They know what a nutritionist does. And often it can be along the lines of, here's an exercise plan, here's a diet plan for you to kind of follow. And that's the expectation that people have. But actually blending in, layering on those health coaching skills and mindset, the conversations are going to be totally different.
So what does that look like? So instead of someone giving you a diet plan or an exercise plan, what will be different then, Tim?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it would be finding out from the person, well, one, what's currently going on in life. just tell me a bit about that. What's going on for you at the moment? And again, I think that's exactly what Alison's physio said. What's going on for you at the moment? What else is going on? And again, just get an idea about the context, and then it's like, out of all of that stuff, what's really important to you at the moment? What really matters? So I think you can get to that what matters to you kind of conversation. Okay, and so what is it that is in what way is this current situation working for you or not working for you? Okay, so what do you want instead? What's the outcome that you might want
Yeah. Yeah.
from this? Okay, well, that sounds great. And what would be good about that? When you've achieved that, what would be good about it? And again, if it was a coaching conversation, you'd move quite quickly, maybe with some people to kind of, okay, so what might get in the way of that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then when you know what's going on, might get in the way of it, then you think, okay, so bearing that in mind, what ideas have you got
Yeah. Yeah.
about how you might achieve it? I've got some thoughts, but what might your thoughts be? That's, so you can see how kind of seamlessly, I suppose, it goes into that kind of very much a coaching conversation.
Sure.
And you blend in the expertise that you have, but it's not your expertise first, I suppose. That's maybe the thing. It's the person's expertise first, and then you join in with yours
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than the other way around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, completely. It's much more asset based, isn't it? It's much more building on your experiences and maybe even some of the things that are working already for you. So you're not saying, don't do that, do this. You're really tailoring it towards what they've already done. Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful. And I think that's sometimes missing in these documents, isn't it? Is that what does that actually look like then? When you say bringing in more peer support and lived experience and health coaching and shared decision making, it helps I think, to have this conversation because it's just subtle shifts, isn't it? But so the other thing I wanted to get onto is one of my slight bugbears really is around and this is from my own kids' experience as well, actually, in the way the workforce is in the leisure sector, which has so much potential, doesn't it? Has so much potential to be an enabling and a kind of like a sort of inspiring sort of force for good. But so often it can be just slightly distorted. And I was talking to a commissioner from the council just recently, and they recognise that some of the sort of the regulation and the kind of like training of coaches in the leisure sector is much more orientated around performance and around sort of sporting ability and outcome from a sporting sense, rather than outcome about how you're growing as a person and how you're developing your own self-confidence and your self-skill. And I think the leisure sector, which is also wanting to come into the MSK space, is so close, but just with a little fine tweak can bring in these coaching skills, whether that's in sports coaching or whether that's in just encouragement within gyms, or it is having these direct health coaching style conversations. I think we can bring those skill sets into those contexts as well, and they can make such a big difference.
So what would that look like, do you think, in terms of the leisure sector kind of getting more involved in community MSK? What might that look like, I suppose?
But I suppose that the one of the I can be specific really, and just think about sort of my experience sometimes of sporting, sort of opportunities that are set up in leisure centres for people, is they're around achieving certain targets, about sort of like, it almost like trying to pursuit of excellence, sort of like you're hitting your personal record, sort of, and particularly for kids, I think there's that sort of like drive to performance as opposed to participation and the fun of joining in, and deliberately trying to make it feel good. I've had so many experiences with my kids where they come back from a thing, oh, it was terrible, we got shouted at, we were told we were not performing. And to some degree, they want to try and be as good as they can. They want the team to be good, but mostly what they want is just to enjoy themselves and to have a laugh and to feel like it was such good fun going there. They want to go back again, and I think, there's a win-win for everybody here, because I think leisure providers, they want people to come through their door. They want their services to be used. They want it to be accessible no matter what your ability, and yeah, there is a top end where your pursuit of excellence and elite is inspiring to everybody. It's wonderful to see people gain medals and perform well, and we can all kind of like, sort of support them and cheer them on. But for the majority of general public, they're going to get more physically active and be looking after their musculoskeletal system by being more proactive. It's It's the social and the connection and the fun side of it that's so important. And I'm not criticizing all personal trainers or all team coaches. I think they're a hugely dedicated bunch. They usually give up their time. They're often poorly paid. They often volunteer, So, but again, it's just another thing I think where you bring in some health coaching skills. It's a tiny little change, and you can make them far more effective about how you how you help people to enjoy what's going on and come back and have this positive energy rather than a little bit of a sort of, I'm feeling like I'm being shouted at and I'm being put down. I don't know. Have you seen that, Tim? You've had kids, haven't you, go through, you know, after school clubs, and you've got kind of family members who have experience of joining in stuff. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my kids, criticize me for not pushing them hard enough, Ollie. On
Do they?
yeah. Well, no, only in jest, in
Come
jest.
to
So,
yeah, yeah.
it's that kind of, that the reason they're not at the World Cup is because I didn't kind of push them as youngsters to kind of, go every week to kind of football training and things like that.
Well, they could have been at Wimbledon. They could have been like
Could have.
they could have been there alongside Jude Bellingham scoring the winning goal for the semi-final. Yeah, if only
Exactly.
you'd pushed them more, Tim.
Exactly. So I feel utterly responsible for that. But but I absolutely agree. Actually, if the leisure centre wants to make it a really big and positive impact, it needs to be working with the people who are at those lower levels of confidence, knowledge, and skills.
Yeah,
Really, of course, you can work with the people who are really highly activated already and make kind of incremental improvements, of course. But in terms of making a really big difference to the nation,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
working with those people who are not the elite athletes, not the people who are just chasing personal best, but people who want to just move a little bit more and get a little bit more active. So, yeah, again, what they don't need probably is the boot camp approach, I would suggest. They need something different to that, which is more encouraging, more paying attention to their kind of starting point and what else is going on for them, and more kind of holistic, I would suggest. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And hearing you say that, it's about that shift, isn't it? I think this is almost the crux of health coaching, isn't it? Or health coaching as we see it. You're shifting away from performance, whether that's health performance, sporting performance. You know, you're moving towards helping people feel good about themselves. I think, and it's the skills that enable people to feel good about themselves. And yeah, sure, if you're poisoning yourself with a really bad diet, or you're really not moving at all, you're probably not going to feel very good about yourself. So that might come into it. But I think the skills of health coaching are the ways of helping people to feel good about themselves and build on that self-belief and self-efficacy and self-worth, if you like, really. And that I think we've really underestimated the value of building that up and how that compounds over time and leads to the end outcomes, the health outcomes that we're after anyway, but that we should be more purposeful in these in the way we deliver the support we deliver, whether that's a leisure provider, whether that's an MSK healthcare professional, whether it's a voluntary sector health coach or link worker trying to support people. I think the core bit for me is the health coaching ethos is how do we help people feel good about themselves and build on that.
Yeah, because actually, if they don't feel good about themselves, why would they bother with all the other stuff? Why would they bother paying attention to their diet and moving more and, not poisoning themselves, actually, if they don't feel they're worth it?
Yeah, yeah.
So again, I think that's maybe the bit that's missing. People maybe, you know, just focus on the bit maybe someone is even being referred for, which is maybe weight loss or maybe getting more active. But actually, some of the reason people are not active, some of the reason that people are not paying attention to their diet and their nutrition, or poison themselves with all sorts of other things, is because they don't feel they're worth bothering with. So if you don't build that, even if you did work with someone and help them make some small changes, there's a really good chance those changes just fritter away over time because the mindset of that person hasn't particularly changed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love about these conversations, Tim. Is it gets us to the crux of why we're doing what we're doing. I think sometimes a misconception that health coaching is around getting people to follow the right diet or to do the right exercise program or getting their blood pressure down, their blood sugar lower. Yes, some of those are ingredients and some of those are end outcomes that follow on. But I think what we've learned, haven't we, that health coaching is that core of building someone's sense of self-worth and agency and the role they take themselves. And that then once you've enabled that, these things follow on. And it's really nice to be able to have the opportunities just to really dive down into that. And let's circle back to the MSK document, to see a document that's starting to articulate the value of this in the NHS that we're all wanting to see thrive. And I think that's a real case for optimism for me, that we're seeing the value of purposefully doing this, purposefully building health coaching skills into our service.
Yeah. And as we've observed, it's not impossible to do it. In fact, it's relatively straightforward to do it, and it doesn't take a whole load more time. It's actually energizing for the practitioners who are learning these skills. Um, so if in the NHS, where people might be kind of feeling a bit burnt out, kind of constantly doing two, actually one way to kind of, I suppose, support people to kind of keep on going is this more doing with and being alongside people is much more rewarding. And we
Yeah,
know that from
yeah, yeah,
people.
yeah. No, it is, isn't it? It is. Well, and that's what will keep us banging this drum, Tim. Really, isn't it? Is that it's a win-win all round, isn't it? Everybody feels better if we focus on these skills. I think. I mean, what do you think is getting in the way of it then? Why aren't we naturally working like this? Is it because we're in this sort of firefighting, constantly chasing a crisis? There are just. It feels like there's such major in your face problems to solve with people that we just don't have time to take any of this health coaching style mindset or practice.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's definitely an element of that. And sometimes when we're really under pressure, what we tend to do is revert to kind of what we think we know works, which is, seeing people more quickly, getting people through the doors, getting the waiting list down and all that kind of stuff, seeing people in shorter periods of time, almost like paying attention to the efficiency part as like that's the only thing that matters. Um, when actually it probably isn't that effective, I would suggest. So I think there's a kind of a way we've been brought up in the system that prioritizes efficiency over absolutely everything else. And there's an element of expectation that people bring and kind of this is what you need to do for me. And I think we are, a lot of us maybe want to want to kind of fit with those expectations that people have of us. Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes we don't want to be too challenging or challenging back. But I think there's a lot of assumptions there. I think there's a lot of assumptions which are limiting for us, which is, we need to see people quickly. That's the only thing that matters. And this is what works. And I think we need to challenge some of those assumptions because I think they're limiting us, but I also think they're limiting the people that we work with as well. What do you think?
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think hopefully this sort of document gives confidence that we've got permission to work in a bit of a different way. I think it definitely needs to be backed up by um, the air cover to do it, the headspace to do it. If you are going to go a bit slower and go a bit deeper with people, you need the system to back you on that. Uh, you know, I, I think I think there's enough evidence out there to show that we can have confidence that if we do take the time to sort people properly, we don't have failure demand, we don't have what I've sometimes called passivity demand. We're not constantly feeding this beast of just doing things to people and doing things for people so they keep coming back. Um, you know, but you do need. I think it's that point now, isn't it, where you need that air cover from the commissioners, from the leaders, that slowing down like this might on the surface look like you're doing less, but you're using different skills in a different way, and I think we just need that confidence that this is the right thing to do, and let's do it. And it might mean that we have to stop doing some other things for the time being that are nevertheless worthwhile, but just just not perhaps as valuable as building people's self-confidence and agency and self-belief.
We talk about this, don't we, on our programs? But we are wired, aren't we, to sort and to solve and to save. that's kind of our wiring. If it wasn't our wiring before we got into the NHS or health and social care system, it definitely is by the time we finished our training. And so we kind of think that that's our job. But actually, if we knew that the people in front of us had the best solutions to their own problems, we would absolutely have different conversations. And I think that's where the health coaching skills and mindset come in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'd be lovely, wouldn't it? I'd love to see what's emerging. I mean, to have an optimistic finish. People are organising in neighbourhoods. We're organising different teams. We're drawing on the voluntary sector. We're drawing on the leisure sector. There's a capacity and capability within those systems that we can draw on. I think we know optimistically that we can build these health coaching skill sets in very easily. Doesn't take a lot of time. Doesn't take a lot of effort. It just really takes a mindset shift. I think we just need a little bit of air cover around the transition period. That probably needs a little bit of funding, but it doesn't need a huge amount. And I really hope as we transition to neighbourhoods, looking at working with different way, there'll be a little bit of funding to do some different projects. And I hope this sort of document will draw them to community MSK projects and give us that little bit of headspace to redesign and reorganise it in this way. And I think there's a huge amount to gain from this. So much to gain.
Yeah. And I know we're coming up to time, but again, the other thing I think would be really exciting about this, and I think you've alluded to it as well, is that actually, if we can see how this might work for the MSK service, there's no reason why other services can't use this really as a blueprint for kind of how they might work more holistically with the people that use their services. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, completely. Well, we've seen it viscerally in chronic pain, and people like Lee Vaughan and Deepak Ravindran who are championing these sort of approaches, haven't we? But we've also seen it in metabolic health, what the public health collaboration are doing, people like, sort of Campbell Murdoch and David Unwin and so on. They're showing how you can enable people to work together in groups, peer support, enabling type care. I've seen the new mental health centre that's set up in the community in Sheffield that I've been a part of, where you're drawing in lived experience, you're drawing the community in. There's so much potential for this. Like you say, it is just that mindset and that confidence that this is what we should prioritise now.
Right. We should probably draw our conversations to a close, but it's been good to talk about that, Ollie. And I know
we've rambled on, haven't we? I hope people find that interesting. I love talking to you about this, Tim, because it helps I actually think as we go along in these conversations. But we'd love to hear from you what it triggers in you and what thoughts you have. Please interact with us on LinkedIn and in the comments in YouTube, and just let us know what you're thinking. We're all on a learning journey together, aren't we?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, in the landscape at the moment is also is really challenging. I was going to say quite. It's really challenging. So actually having conversations like this where we can really focus down on why it is we do this work is really important, and the kind of the value of peer support as well. So again, if you're in this space and you're feeling like you're in the battle, but you're by yourself, please reach out and let's get you together with some other peers who are also in this space. Because I think it's just having that conversation that just encourages you that we're on the right track, and what we're doing feels like the right thing to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And value what you do. Value what really good health coaching conversations do is you see someone grow in front of you, see their energy start to come out of themselves, and see that and value that. That's so important. I would say it's more important than checking their blood pressure or prescribing antidepressant. I mean, that is such a great thing to value. Achieving that, and you don't have to be a doctor to do that. You might be a peer support volunteer. Do you know what I mean? If you see you have that effect on somebody, such a valuable part of the system. So good on you if you're doing those sort of things.
All right, good to speak to you, Ollie. We'll
Nice
let
to speak to
you
you,
go
Tim.
now.
Catch you next time.
See you.